Waiters, what dating disasters have you witnessed? I was bartending at a restaurant in San Francisco. This guy came in and ordered a vodka martini. He downed it and ordered another. Halfway through his third he called his wife and asked for a divorce. After he hung up we talked about the Red Sox. I'm from Boston. I was bartender at a country club in college and I watched a woman curse her husband out at their table because the husband kept flirting with the waitress. She got really loud and walked out. Keep in mind this was a nice restaurant at an upscale country club. The waitress felt it was all her fault but she told me the guy had been coming in there often and tipping her 100% of the bill every time. I used to bartend at a Yard House in the before times. Yard House is a corporate place that's basically a nicer sports bar with a ton of beer on tap with stupid, giant novelty glasses. I had a couple at the bar during happy hour drinking from one of the big glasses and they ordered some onion rings that were half price. He jokingly proposed with an onion ring and she started laughing and jokingly said yes. Then he busted out an actual ring. She wasn't laughing anymore. This happened when I was around 18 or so. I am mostly Native American. This is an important factor to the story. A guy and his date get sat in my section and he immediately asked to speak to my manager. This was before I even took their drink order so I was perplexed but went and grabbed him right away. The dude then asked my manager for a nice white server instead, right in front of me, while giving me a rather disgusted scowl. His date was so horrified she stood up and said, "Oh hell no. That racist, it don't work with me honey. You can sit me at the bar sweetheart, this date is over." The manager made the man leave and calmed his date's food. She left the manager $100 tip for me with a note that said, "You are beautiful and worthy of respect. Always remember that." Her date was a disaster but she made my night. I used to work at a bar where 70% of the customers were on Tinder dates. There was a line of 2-person booths along the wall when you first walk in. There were 2 dudes sitting by themselves in 2 different booths. Both of them were facing the door. One was in the first booth, one was in the last booth. This girl comes in and walks up to the first booth, says hi to the guy, and sits down. They are chatting for about 5 minutes when the other guy who is sitting by himself comes up to her and says, "Hey, I'm so and so, such you so and so." They all talk for like 30 seconds and she gets up and goes and sits with the other guy at the last booth. Eventually a different girl shows up for a date with the guy at the first booth. I don't know exactly what happened, but I almost died watching it unfold. She was definitely embarrassed. I worked at a bar in a hotel for 5 years. I had a table come down from their hotel room and sit at one of my pub tables for dinner. From the moment they sat down, you could tell the wife was furious about something. She was unbelievably pleasant toward me, but did not say a single word to the man at the table. I get their drinks and then their orders. He ordered steak and she ordered the sauciest pasta dish we had on the menu. About 20 minutes later, the wife still hadn't said a word to the man since they sat down. Their food was done and my food runner set it on the table. Right as I was about to walk over to see if they needed anything else, I saw the woman stand up, say, "Go duck yourself, John," as she picked up the plate of pasta and dumped it all over his head and down into his lap. Then she very calmly walked out of the bar and back up to her hotel room. I spent a few minutes helping the man clean up and got my manager to come handle the situation from there as it was way above my pay grade at that point. Later in the night, the woman came back to the bar without the man and we talked for a while. Turns out he admitted to cheating on her right before their dinner reservation. I never saw either of them again. I was a waiter at a very famous upscale restaurant and a gentleman approached the matron requesting someone take pictures of him proposing to his girlfriend. Since I was the closest arsehole to the matron, I was tasked with performing this duty. After stalking the table for a solid hour, the moment was inevitably approaching. I set up at an angle she couldn't see me, and when he busted out the ring I started taking as many pictures as I could. Anyone who has tried to capture a once-in-a-lifetime moment on camera knows that you're not really watching what's going on. You're just trying to frame the moment. After about 20-30 pictures, I slowly realized that she was declining the proposal and the scene was quickly degenerating into a 5-alarm dumpster fire. However, I was far enough away that I couldn't hear what was being said and couldn't be sure of what was transpiring, so I continued taking pictures just in case. Finally I stepped back and watched the scene unfold in reality as she stormed out of the restaurant in embarrassment and he scrambled to pay the bill and chase after her. He'd requested that I use my phone and send the best pictures to him. Needless to say he never approached us for the pictures and I have about 100 plus pictures of a wedding proposal gone wrong somewhere deep in my iCloud photo bank. I worked fine dining in Vail, Colorado. I once saw a lady throw red wine all over a guy's shirt and leave. He sat and continued eating his spaghetti plate. No ducks. I used to work as a hostess at a thank deity it's the weekend already. Guy makes a reservation at the most booked table. It's by the window. All romantic etc. Also super visible from any other part of the restaurant. Comes in. All dressed up and with a suitcase. Strange, but okay. A few minutes later, his date arrives. They laugh. Flirt. We actually thought it's an anniversary or he is going to propose or something the way it was going. Nope. Halfway through the evening she starts screaming at him. He broke up with her and actually packed her suitcase. Then paid and left her there sobbing at the table alone. We got her a brownie on the house. Because just watching that we felt ducking awful. Not a disaster but it could have been. Guy hires private room in the very fine dining establishment I'm working in. Dinner for two. Champagne. Proposal dinner. Gives us instructions to bring the champagne when she says yes. I jump the gun and poke my head into the room holding the champagne. Just to check I haven't missed it. Guy sees me. Has a panic fit and throws up. All over the table. Woman is very concerned, goes over to see if he's okay. He hits duck it and pulls out the ring. Drops to one knee and proposes. With vom still on him and the table. She bursts out laughing. Says yes and kisses him. On the head. Get them a new table in a different room and serve the champagne. MFW I hope I find love like that one day. This happened to a friend of my wife. She met a guy on a dating site. They agreed to meet at a strip mall parking lot and go to dinner together from there. He asks if he can drive her car. Because it's a Camaro and he's never driven one. So they go together in her car. To a restaurant a couple miles away. Dinner goes okay. Nothing too crazy. Then he gets up to go to the bathroom and never comes back. After 10 minutes, she gets up to check on him. And her car is gone. He's dashed on the bill and stolen her car. She pays the bill. And gets an Uber home. And calls the police to report her car stolen. Turns out the guy just left it in the parking lot where they originally met. And seems to think he did nothing wrong. Last I heard he's still being charged with auto theft. A couple of friends and I went to the Mexican restaurant where another friend was waiting tables. There was a couple kind of catty cornered from us that had a bit of an off vibe. We could see them, but not really hear them. So we asked our server friend what was up. She said it seemed to be a first or second date that was a bit awkward. The girl had ordered one of those enormous margaritas and was not sharing it. I had to go make a phone call back in the payphone days, and when I came back, I ended up sitting with my back to the couple. Maybe 10 minutes later, I hear our friend the server say, no, and the sound of a full punch bowl being emptied from a great height. Giant margarita girl had stood up, swayed a bit, and vomited all over their meals, table, and the surrounding floor. The restaurant calmed everyone sitting nearby, and the girl's date abandoned her in the ensuing chaos. I'm a waitress in my father's restaurant. It's not that big, but we're usually full during weekends. A lot of couple come here cause it's kinda chic for a French restaurant. Anyway, once there was a couple, early 30s. The dude arrived earlier than the girl, so either it was something like a date but the girl ordered everything. She chose all the dishes, the dessert and even the wine without even asking the guy what he would like to have. They both didn't talk, only said good evening. Weird for a date, but when I came at their table to serve the wine, they started to argue about their relationship. The dude was convinced that she cheated on him, and you know what? She admitted that and said very loud that he was bad in bed. At this moment any single cell in my body was cringing. They kept arguing for 10 minutes until I decided to stop them, cause they were almost yelling and so disturbing the 15 people in the restaurant. The woman asked if she could have another bottle of wine, and she left within 5 minutes with the bottle. I felt so bad for this guy that I gifted him his whiskey coca. Edit. Orthograph. Me be French, me bad at English. P. Okay. Here's a great story that I've been wanting to share. I work at a small bakery in my town. I am general kitchen staff and not a waiter, but I was there when this all went down. It was around 2 in the afternoon. The day had been normal, but suddenly I saw the retail staff in a huddle and took my first opportunity to go see what was happening. Apparently a couple had come in on this summer day, ordered 2 bowls of soup and sat down. The girl that took their order went to the back and prepared their soup for them, then brought it back out. In the time it took for her to get the soup, the woman had taken off her flip-flop, put her leg across the table, and the guy was going to town sucking on this lady's toes in the middle of the restaurant. The waitress didn't notice until she went to place the soup on the table. She stood there in shock, and the couple was oblivious to her presence. This guy is going all in, and the lady is starting to moan by the time they realize their soup is ready. The waitress was in complete shock for the rest of her shift, and that couple is no longer allowed on the premises. This place has even more weird stories. From someone forcing open the back door to ask for a hamburger to a complete stranger coming out of the basement and acting like he's supposed to be there. Not to mention the time I watched a bird fly out of a hole in the ceiling. Kentucky can be a weird place. The place got extremely busy, but these 2 15-year-old lovebirds had been sitting on a table for several hours, just ordered 1 milkshake. Had to politely ask them to leave as it was clear they were just looking for a safe PDA spot together away from their parents. Bartender for a couple on a Tinder date. They talk for about an hour. He goes to the bathroom but left his jacket on the back of his chair with his wallet and keys in. She stole them, stole his car, and went shopping. That poor schmuck refused to call the cops for an hour because it was going so well. I felt bad for him. I watched a proposal in the dining room of the hotel I worked at. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the dessert and ring box to be brought out. She saw the box and just started saying no, and told the crushed groom, "We need to talk." People who initially were clapping just slowed to a dead silence. She ended up going back to the room, collecting her things and leaving, while he cried at the table for a few minutes. It was super depressing for all the staff, guests and that poor guy. Couples fight in restaurants a lot. That or maybe they argue everywhere. I couldn't say. I worked as a waiter for years and I could not begin to count the number of arguments I saw. But one guy comes to mind above all of them. This guy must have been 50-60 years old and got angry with his lady. He actually threw a snit and stomped off and was wandering around the restaurant and looking back at her and scowling. It was like a child throwing a temper tantrum. But most children aren't even this dramatic usually. It was nauseating to watch. Bartender here. A couple on a blind date took their seats directly across from the dishwasher, so I had to pretend I couldn't hear him. 40 plus. Balding. Overweight. Drunk. Asking her. 30 plus. Pretty. Friendly. And level-headed. "Listen, I see you over there. Just amazing and gorgeous. And I'm wondering what you're seeing in me. What do you think?" She smiled, cringed and made an effort to sidestep his questions and change the subject at least 3 times, while he ordered shots of Fireball at an upscale establishment. For both of them, she would politely refuse, and he would end up drinking both of them. He didn't seem to be big on learning. My favorite was a couple who asked to be seated on the patio, and chose the furthest table from other guests. I go over to greet them with a smile and some good energy, and the woman locks eyes with me and says this is not going to be a fun evening. The guy with her then tries to order a margarita and she said you can have a Coke, and proceeds to order a Cosmo for herself, and they both get burgers. I go in to tell the hosts not to seat anyone near them, and for the next hour this woman lays into the guy while he sat there and took it. Clearly he had ducked up in a major way, from the snippets I heard. And she was explaining to him in great detail the way he had ducked up, lost her trust, and it was over. She was incredibly civil, unflinchingly polite, and so confident. She finished, handed me her card, and walked away with him still at the table after she left me a solid 30% tip. She was awesome. I want to be her when I grow up. This couple came into this bar that I worked at and it was business as usual. Took their order, brought out drinks and food, including dessert. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, this couple began to argue as they worked through their dessert about the guy didn't bring a battery pack to charge their phones. Homegirl is straight up screaming at this dude. Luckily, it was a really slow night and they were only ones in the restaurant. I offer to charge their phone if they have their cable. I never offer to charge anybody's phones because I don't like dealing with the hassle. But I felt for the guy because I was that guy at one point. This is the point where I feel like I should have thought something was up. The guy hands me what looks like a busted up prepaid phone you get from the supermarket and what looked like a chewed up charger cable. I run to the back and go to charge it only to find out the cable wasn't compatible with the phone. I go back to them and notice they left without paying. I was more impressed than I was upset. TLDR. Couple pretended to get into argument over charging phone. Then dine and dashed after I go in and attempt to help. Nothing particular, but I see a lot of couples that spend their entire dinner time without talking and just staring at their phones. Doesn't necessarily mean they are in a bad relationship, but it makes me sad for some reason. Caught a couple ducking in the washroom stall. Politely asked them to stop. Had to wait for them to finish. Once they finished they sat back down at the dinner table. After 15 minutes I heard the woman scream something about STDs. The man looking angry got up and stormed off, leaving the woman behind. I kept my interaction with the table brief, but I'll never forget the time I had a couple come in and as I was setting down the entree the lady looked at her man stone cold, pointed to his phone and said, "So who this hoe you been texting?" Me, of course, neither being the hoe nor texter in question, made definite haste away from that conversation. I do remember her asking to split the bill at the register though. I was a bartender at a restaurant that specializes in seafood. This couple came in and it was obviously a first date. They were both very awkward. They ordered a few dishes. One of them was a dish with crystal shrimps, peeled, without the actual hard shell, but still with head and whisker things and stuff. The guy proceeded to eat the entire shrimp, like head and tail and everything. It was as crunchy and horrible as you can imagine. Saw a proposal take a turn when the guy put the ring in her champagne. She drank the champagne quickly unknowingly and started to choke. Guy performs a Heimlich maneuver and the ring pops out only to fly into someone else's food. Guy had what appeared to be 2 heart attacks, but in the end the lady did say yes. Side note, because of the almost death they got free dessert and they laughed about the whole evening, saying till death do us part for real, and they wanted no beverages at all unless it was super clear and if the guy didn't order it. Not really a disaster, but a funny story. I was a waiter at a nice restaurant. Got 2 young people coming in, obviously on a first date. The girl say to me at some point that she have a seafood allergy. Then the guy ordered seafood right after that. It took him a couple of seconds after I asked him if he was sure it was a good idea, with a knowing look, to understand what I meant. He ordered some chicken. You know, you really should not kiss someone who ate seafood if you have an allergy to that. I hope the rest of the date went well for them after that. Not a waiter, but one time I went to a decent restaurant and got seated next to a couple on a date. Not sure why our waiter chose that table when half the room was empty, but anyways, they were an elderly couple, probably in their 70s. The guy looked pretty humbled and the lady was completely dressed up, bedazzled dress and everything. They had been flirting pretty hard during their appetizer, and when their dinner came, that's when the it hit the fan. The man took his shoes off and was teasing the lady's legs with his toes. Then the lady took her shoes off too, and after a good round of footsies, the guy decided to massage her feet while they were eating finger food. I've never choked so hard. I swear I could see him rubbing right in between her toes. I just can't imagine how they're able to do that whilst